Hello everyone, welcome to another OLLO Chat episode. In this one we have two amazing engineers, Sie and Martin, from all over the world, because I guess you guys work wherever the work actually takes you. So yeah, welcome to the show, I guess. We don't do these podcasts too much, but when we do, it's actually fantastic and great because there are people, ambassadors of OLLO Audio, that do take an hour out of their day to share their experience with the community. And so here we are. Let's start with Sie. How are you?
Hey, Rock. I'm really well. Thank you for having me. This is going to be nice to socialize in a way with you guys today.
Where are you joining us from?
I'm in the UK. I'm based in London. I'm not there at the moment. I'm on the South Coast. I've been here for a couple of days. I'll return to London tonight.
And Martin, you're also in the UK at the moment?
I am indeed. Yeah, you've caught me on a rare day off at home, just sort of getting into the busy summer schedule for me. So, but yeah, I'm nicely at home.
So, in short, I mean, we've been connected for quite a while, Sie for a little bit longer than Martin. You've joined the train with the X1 headphones, you have them over there. And honestly, I was trying to, drill down a little bit more about you two. What do you actually do, where you come from, as in, the professional background and so on. And you've both been in the industry for a fairly long time. So maybe, Si, you can start a little bit, like 2 or 3 minutes to illustrate your background, and what you do currently, basically, maybe the last project that we're going to talk about.
So you know a little bit about me, Rock, but those here watching probably don't know much about me. I've been in music one way or another for nearly 3 decades. I started making cups of tea. Here's one in the mid 90s in a studio in East London. It was called Milo and later became Loco, which is a huge studio management company these days. So I came up through the traditional route of tape op, and I became a chief engineer at the studio that I was working at in Hoxton Square. And all the way along, I was making music of my own. I was interested to make music all of my life from very young. In any shape or form, electronic music. I was in bands playing jazz and kind of progressive jazz rock and funk, things like that. Anything that had a groove to it. So my route in as an engineer, I was still making music, and that, fortunately for me, timing, where I was in the world, everything came together and aligned. And pretty quickly, I was making records of my own. And once people heard those, they were like, oh, this kid down at Milo, he can make records for us. So I started producing for other people. And somehow I seemed to pull it off. And I was really interested in mixing as well. So that was a path that I took very seriously. And so I've probably been mixing about 22, 23 years professionally. I'd say it took me at least 5 to 7 years to call myself a mixer.
What about the educational part? Sorry to jumping in. But when you said something really cool, and I've had an episode with Adam Mosley, which is a British engineer. He worked at Trident back in the days, and now he's in LA. I had an episode on education as well, and you've nudged me there a little bit with 5 to 7 years to call yourself an engineer. So, what's the role of educational institutes, academies these days? Because you went the traditional route of going through the studio as a T-boy and eventually, developed the skills. These days, that does not exist, and honestly, everybody's doing things at home using, home appropriate tools many times. So the educational part, maybe the tips and tricks or the overall mindset of an engineer got lost in the translation. What do you think about it?
I completely agree that it's a confusing space. Yeah. When I started, and when Adam started, who you mentioned, there wasn't a way to learn this in a university or a private school. It was on the job, learn it there and then. And I think it's fantastic that it exists now in an educational space. Good segue, by the way. Thank you, Rock. You set me up well, good there. I also started my own online academy about a year and a half ago, where I felt there was a gap in the market. So university route is fantastic. It's great. You come out with a degree, but you don't come out with any experience. That's the huge part of it that's missing from education. So I set up my academy so that my students and people that I mentor could learn directly from my experience. First and foremost, that being my selling point, my 3 decades of experience. This is what I've learned. Try this, try that. There's a part of it that can't be taught by me or a uni or anyone, and that's who you are as a person. Being able to get along with different types of people, being able to work under pressure.
I have a memory jumped into my head right now. Again, talking with one of our ambassadors, Mark Urselli, a fantastic engineer, and he mentioned in one of the calls, you have to be worthy of being in the room. And I would like to pick, Martin, your brain right now. I'm skipping the introduction. We'll get back to it. But what would be, what do you think? What comes to mind when you hear something like you have to be worthy of being in the room as an engineer?
I think it's a really good. It's a really good example of how the industry works, actually. And actually, what you're saying, Si, is so relevant. I think across all elements of the industry, it's all about who you are as a person. And personally, I find I've got to where I am today just based on who I am and the way I approach things. And I've kind of got this like happy-go-lucky approach to pretty much everything in life. I'm pretty positive. I'm pretty relaxed most of the time. And I really feel like that lends itself to being successful and to being taken seriously as well. Like, there's so many people trying to get into this industry, whether it be in the studio space or in the live space or whatever, in management, being an artist, being a mixer, being a writer, whatever. There's so many people going for that, for that title, for that position. And really, it just comes down to who you are. As you say, Si, it's so important to be approachable and to be such a, as you say, to be given that sort of seat in the room, to be in that room.
We were playing with a concept a while ago with another London-based engineer. I don't know why I'm just going back with all these calls that I did in the past with Amir Yakub, a really good one. Again from London. I don't know what's going on in London.
It's in the water, Rock.
It must be.
Fantastic. It's being worthy of being in the room. But we were exploring a concept of a professional beginner. So in terms of there are people that wants to get into the industry. Of course, you have to learn the ropes and so on. But you can do that as an as a mindset, I would say, like maybe an amateur or a hobby approach versus doing it as a career path, as a professional career path. You know, if you want to be a doctor, you have a clear career path and you have to be professional throughout the school's years to finish it. So the idea of, you know, being a professional beginner in the audio industry is kind of interesting to me. So maybe Si, you do work with you know, different, I'm guessing, with youngsters as well as a little bit more mature folks in the industry. Do you think this concept of professional beginner has a merit?
Definitely has a merit, 100%. And you said something interesting there. It's a mindset as well. I'm working with, as you said, youngsters and people who have come to music later. And one of the things that I spend time with people doing when I'm mentoring them is getting them into the mindset that this is what they do. On my passport, it says music producer, because that's what I am. And some people who come into music from a hobby side, they may reach a super high level that is on par with what me and Martin are doing. But because they consider themselves a former accountant or teacher in a school, music has always been this thing that's out of reach. However, it's not. It's all about, what do you think you are and what is it that you do? I make music, period. I'm very certain about that. It also says it in my passport. However, there are loads of people with mad talent who can do what I can do. And it's about showing up to do that every day, which is what I do every single day. I will at some point do something to do with music. With these on my head, by the way. This is what makes it possible. You know, I genuinely mean that. These go with me everywhere I go. And I can immediately be on a level with what I need to do, whether it's a job or whether it's just trying out a new instrument or plugin.
But you also said show up. That's also important. I'm going to circle back to Martin with the show up, because I'm wondering, how did you show up in the industry to get the introduction as well squeezed in there?
You know what? So much of what Si is saying resonates with me. And, you know, we have a very different path to this industry, but also very similar. Like, and I'm sure it's very similar for most people, but like, for me, it started early on in life. I was always around music. My dad was a musician, just playing in pubs and clubs, you know, just sort of doing like a sort of covers band thing. And I was just surrounded by music my entire life. My brother played drums. He was DJing. You know, my dad played guitar. My mum played piano. I was just surrounded by it, and I just really got engulfed in it. And that's really what sort of shaped me, I think. And then, but I guess around the age of 9, I started learning piano. I'm wrong. But about 12 I learned piano. At 9, I started DJing. And then, yeah, sort of got to 12, and I sort of started diddling around with piano, and I ended up getting a job at a music store in the town I grew up in. And one of the guys I was working with had a studio in his like garage. So one day, you know, he invited me along, and I was probably like 14 at this point, you know. So I had no idea what anything was really. Like, I had no idea what a producer was, what anyone did in this industry. You know, I just kind of knew that I loved music. Anyway, so that was my sort of entry into sort of the studio world. I'd sort of go to this guy's house every weekend, and we just write music, whatever it was. You know, it could be anything. Could have been rock, could have been house, could have been garage, could have been really anything. But I was fairly happy in that, like, okay, I work at this music shop and that's my life, you know. But at this point I was, you know, 14, 15, 16. Had no idea what I wanted to do with school. You know, I was just quite happy just going home and DJing and writing music and this, that, and the other. And then eventually I went to sixth form and I studied music technology, which was, I think at my school, certainly that was the first year they were doing it. So it was, you know, it was like recording a song onto a 4-track tape recorder, you know, but it's all stuff that I had no idea how to do at that point, and it really shaped what I do now. Eventually I went to university. I went to Stafford University. I did, what did I do? I can't remember the course name. Perhaps it was music technology, but I got there, I did a year and I hated it because it was just sitting down in front of someone talking at you and telling you how to calculate the reverb time of a room, and like that just wasn't interesting to me at all, you know. So I kind of had the sort of decision really in me. It was like three things. It was stay and do this course and hate it and probably fail really, drop out and go and get a job somewhere doing something, or I could transfer to a different university and try a different course, which is what I ended up doing. I transferred to Westminster University. I did commercial music, which they had like 3 different routes in their course. They had like the sort of business side of it. They had the like sociology kind of side of it, and then they had the production and the performance and all that. And I mean, on paper, I took the production and performance route, but I did all of it because all of it interested me, and it was so interesting. So, you know, I came out of that course, and again at the time, you know, I moved down to London, and while I was studying, I got another job at another music shop in London. And I was, again, quite happy just sort of selling pianos to people and making music on the side and whatever. And I'm sorry, this is taking me a while to answer, by the way, but I'm trying to circle back to what you were saying, Si. All of this time, I was happy with music being what I enjoyed, but not what I did, you know? And it wasn't until a few years later, I was probably maybe 25, 26. I was working at another place, and I was essentially selling these things called receptors. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's like a 2U plugin host. It was a computer in a 2U rack. It just hosted plugins for people playing live, essentially. And I was selling these things to people. And I made all these contacts, essentially the people that are me now, right? So I'd be selling these things, and I'd be working on music in the evenings. I had a studio at the place I worked, so I'd do a 9 to 5 during the day, and then I'd probably work from 5 till 1 or 2 a.m. just working on music. I had a band. I had another production thing I was doing. So much stuff similar to you, Si. And eventually, I got a manager that I really didn't like, and I was miserable for a long time. And it really took my now wife telling me, like, you need to leave this place because it's going to kill you, you know. So at the time, my wife was living in Panama, which is where she's from originally, and I thought, okay, tell you what, why don't I leave this job? I'll take a month. I'll take a month out. I'll go to Panama for a month. I'll finish this album I'm working on, and I'll see if I can make a thing of it, you know. So of course I went to Panama. I didn't touch the album. I just enjoyed the sun, and I just enjoyed being there. And of course, on the flight home, it suddenly set in. I was like, I should really think about getting this job that I need to get, or doing something with this album that I need to finish, or whatever. Anyway, I land. I'm at like the luggage carousel, and I get a call from this guy that I sold one of these things to maybe a year ago. And it's the drummer for a German band called Schiller, and he calls me. He says, "Hey, you play keys, right? You know, we haven't talked in a while. It's been probably a year since you sold me one of these things, but you play keys, right?" I'm like, "Yeah." So, "Oh, do you want to come on tour with us? We need a keyboard player." And I thought of you. And in my mind at that time, like my immediate response was, "I can't do that." You know, I can't do that. That's not what I do. And, you know, again, it took a firm sitting down with my wife to say, what are you thinking? Like, you should go and do this. This is a great opportunity. And, you know, again, I'm sorry this is taking a while, but eventually I said yes. I went and did it. And it's what I've done ever since 2013. And, you know, I've been doing many roles in that industry since, but that's what started it all. And that's what made me, you know, decide, yes, this is what I do now. And this is who I am. It's not just a side thing. It's not a hobby. It's not, you know, this is what I do. And here we are.
So you've mentioned, well, actually, you didn't mention, but I've read on your webpage, you know, in a big font, I believe, you're a playback engineer. Would you maybe illustrate a little bit what that is? Because it's not, you know, it's not so common. We usually talk about mixing engineers, mastering engineers, producers, recording engineers, assistants, and so on. A playback engineer, you know, sounds a little bit different. Is it?
In some senses, yeah, for sure. But also in many senses, no. I mean, so I sort of float around a few different roles in this world, right? So I'm a music director, I'm a playback engineer, and then I do some studio stuff on the side when I've got time, which is very rare. But essentially, a playback engineer in a live environment is the guy that's running the show, essentially, right? So, say for example, I've got the role of a playback engineer, and that is my only role on that tour. There's a music director that's in charge of all the music. There's a band. There's the artist. There's everything else going on. I'm sort of the sort of hub of what happens in the show. So say we've got some playback on tracks. Say we've got some MIDI going to places. Say we've got auto tune running. Say we've got anything that you can kind of put into a computer during a live show. That is kind of what I'm in charge of. So, you know, I'm running, you know, percussion tracks. I'm running backing vocal tracks. I'm running this, that, and the other. And essentially, it's my job to shape all of that and to make it into something that essentially take it from the studio into a live environment and have it done in a way that it translates properly and that it's not so obvious that you're using playback.
What's the overlap with a traditional front of house? You know, so you are not doing actual front of house, you're doing the playback part. So there's another engineer working on the full front of house mix. So how does that collaboration work? Sorry, Sai, I'll circle back to you in a minute.
All good.
sorry to take up all the time. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a number of engineers involved. So to some extent, usually the music director is some sort of engineer himself. So he's got his own ideas. Then there's a monitor engineer who looks after the bands and the artist monitors and all of the crew. And then there's a front of house engineer. So there's sort of typically 2, 3, or 4 of these people with the same mindset, all trying to reach the same point, right? And it's actually a good reference. You mentioned like that sort of where the crossover is. Certainly in my world, nothing is ever finished, and I know that that's a thing in the music industry anyway. Nothing's ever finished, but essentially, a song gets finished, it gets mixed, it gets mastered, it gets released, and essentially, it's finished, right? However, when you bring it into the live world, it kind of gains a whole new life. So, and it literally never finishes because you're always chipping away at it. You know, it can be the same for it can be one way for one tour, and it could be a completely different way for the next tour. But between those things, you're always chipping away and trying to make things better and trying to make things work better and sound better and whatever. And a good example of this that I'll try not to take up too much time. We were just in rehearsals in LA. I'm playback engineer for Shawn Mendes, who I've been with since 2019. We were just in rehearsals in LA, and we kind of took an opportunity to really dig into how the tracks, how the playback is sitting in the mix, because I've been working on this since 2019, so a long time, and it's always just been kind of like okay, playback's there, it is what it is. Front of house engineer will mix it the way he mixes it. The monitor engineer will mix it the way he mixes it. But it's just kind of, it's anyone's game, you know. But the music director really wanted to gain more control over that. So what we did was we were like running rehearsals all day, and we were recording everything at front of house, and we'd have stems of the band, we'd have stems of playback, we'd have a left and right, everything. After the day's rehearsal, we'd bring it all back into Ableton, and I'd sort of level it up nicely to where it should sit. And it sort of then allowed us to really chip away at the finer details of, okay, well, this arpeggio isn't standing out the way it should when it's mixed like this. So let's bring that out. Or this kick sample is too loud, so let's bring that down. And it's a really collaborative way of, as you say, bringing that sort of front of house engineer's experience and what he's doing there, bringing it back to me to then make the changes there. Again, just to make things better and better and better, and more cohesive and just make things translate, hopefully better each time. I hope that answers your question.
Very, very nicely explained there, because this is something that I do from time to time, from the other end, you know, but always from bringing a project from a studio to a stage. And all of those roles that you mentioned there, musical director and playback engineer, that's something that I really enjoy about part of my skill set. And that word skill set, Martin, you have to have quite a lot of skills in your toolbox to be able to pull that off.
True, but you know, Sai, you've been... do you speak Japanese by any chance?
I don't speak Japanese, no. I speak some when I'm there, yeah.
Yeah, when I was researching and, you know, diving deep into who Martin is and who Sai is, I found something from Japan on your pages about the Kodo drummers. Can you share a little bit about that project? I mean, sure, creatively and what it's about, but also technically. He's working abroad in a studio that probably you're not super familiar with. I'm sure that having reference, you know, headphones, but at least reference tracks can help you gauge your way around, you know, recording sessions and mixing sessions. Can you elaborate a little bit on that project? But I think it's different than electric guitars that we're maybe used to talking about. It's a huge drum, so how do you even capture that?
Yeah, that's such a fun project, man. So about a year and a bit ago, a friend and collaborator of mine, we were sitting together and we were talking about how much we love taiko drums, the Japanese taiko orchestras. And him and I, we love modular synthesizers. That's why we were sitting together. We were making some music and jamming on these two modular setups. And we said, wouldn't it be great to do an album with a taiko orchestra and modular synthesizers? And so we got totally carried away with the idea and decided to research who was the best. And we came across these guys called Kodo, who are on a small island off the northwest coast of Honshu. Tiny little island called Sado, and they live there, they train there, they make all their drums there. They built this village called Kodo Village. So we contacted them and said, yeah, we do this and we do that. We would love to do something with you. And they said yes, which we were blown away by. And we started immediately going to work remotely. So I was in London and Brussels, where I'm based, and my friend is down in Milan. So we would get together and work on tracks together, and they would send us recordings. And every single time we tried something, it worked. It was like, this is ridiculous. Like every single track works. And everybody was really happy about it. And then after about 10 months, we said, right, let's wrap this record up and do it together in the same place and record some things together in the same place so that we've, you know, we haven't just done something on other sides of the planet. So me and Alberto went to the island. In itself was a mission because we went in February and it was snowing hard, like crazy snow. And we made it to Kodo village, which was amazing to see. You can look it up, kodo.com. And they had built this amazing space to train in called the Keiko Bar. It's a big, big wooden room, massively high ceilings, and you can get about 100 people in it if you want to. And we had quite a lot of Kodo members meet us when we arrived and look at us like, so what are we doing? And there's a saying in the UK, which is flying by the seat of your pants, which means you don't know what you're doing. You are going to make it up as you go along. So I'm standing there in front of 30 drummers looking at me like, what are we doing? And my friend Alberto's looking at me like, what are we going to do? And I said, what microphones have you got? And they brought out this selection of microphones. And I set up a Decca triangle like I would to record an orchestra. And then we discussed with a translator by our side, you know, what the best configuration for them would be. And they started to set drums up, and then I put spot mics on different parts of the taiko crew. And I had a little mixer in the room, a little sub mixer in the room, which was feeding out to a control room. So I had these plugged into the little sub mixer, and I was doing things there in the live room in the Keiko Bar. And then I was running into the control room to check everything. All the while, patching something into my modular synth. You know, I'd got off a plane. The thing was completely fresh. There's no patch cords in it. And somehow we just pulled it off. You know, I've hit play on my modular and everything was syncing. They really loved what they were hearing. We'd set up some speakers in the room, which I also mic'd. And we recorded 4 tracks every day and left, you know, a few days later with another album in our pockets, which I then brought back to Europe. And I've got my studio in Brussels, and I've also got a studio in London. So I spent a few weeks going between the 2 rooms mixing. Alberto joined me for the final session, and it's going to come out. It's finished. So we've got 2 albums. We've got the one we did separately, and then we've got the live one which we did together, which was kind of like a dream come true, you know. We just set our minds on this project and it happened, and we just went with it, you know. We all of us, the taiko crew, me, Alberto, we all just leaned into what,
you know, this happened because you showed up in February in snow. So showing up is like 99% of the job done. Yeah, most people never show up, or at least not consistently, which is again a big thing in the industry in general, any industry actually, not just the music industry. So really nice. How did you keep, you know, track of all these recordings and takes that you did? How did you, well, not keep track, more like how did you monitor them well?
in this book I've got like three of these books, and they're all full of.
Even if I touch a little bit on the early concept of professional beginner, right? You do need to somehow track what you're doing, and at least for me, I'm a total amateur in this field. Of course, I'm an audio engineer in the acoustic science and headphones, but when it comes to recording and mixing, I'm, an amateur level. I know the basic stuff, but I always get tricked after version 5 or 6 or 7, and I have no idea where things are anymore. And especially, 3 months later, when you do like 7 other projects or different songs and you return to the one from a few months ago, I have notes in there that I have no idea what they mean anymore. It's like starting from scratch, which by definition means I'm not a professional mixing engineer. But I do have 2 great mixing engineers over here. So how do you guys tackle these, keeping things organized? And did you actually know where things are? Did you constantly search for files and so on? I imagine, Martin, working from 2019, you mentioned before, with Shawn Mendes. You've worked with other artists as well. Don't be so humble. You've worked with Lipa, with big names in the industry. So you gotta perform. You have to be professional. And I imagine you cannot store all these little things inside your head. So here's the question to both of you. I'll start with Martin. How do you keep track of all these projects and all this stuff and all your hard drives and all these backup files, I guess? How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a job in itself, I think. I mean, file management is at the heart of everything I do, really, because without that, well, you're kind of nothing in this world, right? So, it kind of starts with me, certainly, is, my like live project folder is as tidy as I can possibly make it, so that I can make it so that if I ever need to find a file or find something within that folder, I know exactly where to look. I can go in the stems folder, I can go to, okay, this is on this album, so I've got a folder for that album, I've got then a folder for each song on that album. And then it kind of breaks it up into those sort of nice, easy to remember things that I can think, okay, I know exactly where this thing is, and this is how I get to it. This is what I need to do. And essentially, file management is everything, as I say. And it's from there. It's then backed up in every way you could possibly think. It's on hard drives. It's in Dropbox, sometimes on Google Drive as well. Because if I was to lose that one folder, that's it. That's the whole show. So again, I mean, literally the other day I went through the airport and I got to security, and the guy pulled my bag, and I've got like 20 hard drives, like 20 of those like Samsung T7 SSDs. He's like, what are all these for? And I'm like, well, it's what I do. Literally 20 of these hard drives, because I always carry everything. Like I've got everything that goes back to when I started this job from 2013, all the way to now, just in case I ever need it. And I probably never will, but it's always there just in case. And also, it's kind of nice to look back on how I've changed and how my workflow's changed over the years, because I'm sure looking at a project from 2015 would be wildly different to something I've got now, because I've now got this mindset of making sure that my file architecture is so down to the nail. It's interesting.
It is. File management. There's a thing, right, that didn't exist when I started making music. There was no file management. There was managing tapes that were recorded on, and it's just as important, the role of knowing what tape's got the take on it as it is knowing which hard drive's got the take on it. And so the reason why I have a little book with me at all times is because if I'm saving a file on my computer and I've got my system like you have, like everybody has, that's one part of the puzzle. The other part for me is I write it on a piece of paper physically with my hand, And that information seems to cement more in my own filing system in my brain, combined with control click on the file. I always put a little green dot on the one that I'm working on. The versions, it could be version 30 that I get to, and version 30 will have a little green dot. So when I go into that folder, it's looking at me. There's the dot, that's it. And if there's one that's nearly the green dot, it's purple for me. And then if things start to get really funky, maybe there's an orange dot on one of them, and then, you know, so on and so forth. But writing it down really works for me. And I do the same when I'm going to go and meet with somebody to talk about a project, or if I'm going to meet with you guys to talk about this on here, I will write down in my book things that I want to talk about. And then I'll close the book and I won't think about it again. But when I get to this day to talk to you or to talk to somebody, it will all come back. Bam, there it is, straight in front of me. Yeah.
That sounds very similar to how I work as well, but I'm in more of a digital world in that I do all of that, but I do it in like a Google sheet, right? So again, I've got stuff color coded. When I start a project, say I'm starting as a musical director for something, I've got like a master sheet of all of their songs with all of the BPMs, all of the keys, all of the everything you can think of, and they're all color coded for what album they're on or whatever, or the mood of the song, or, you know, whatever stupid thing I'm thinking of. And then eventually I'll get into preparing those songs for a live performance. And again, I've got another sheet within that sheet that's my sort of like progress bar almost. So anything I'm just starting is red, you know, and then as I update stuff, as I continue to do stuff, it goes orange, and eventually it'll go green when it's done, you know. And it's a very similar thing, but as I say, but in my world, it's on Google Sheets, and it really helps. Not only your like mental load, like knowing that, okay, this is done, this is green, okay, this is purple, or this is orange, that means I need to do this. But it also, it kind of it takes it out of your head for starters, so that your head isn't like, you know, scrambled with all of this information and stuff you need to do. But it also, as you say, you can kind of reference back to it later on, and you don't have to have it in front of you, but the fact that you've actually done it previously, like you say, like, you know, you've thought about the stuff you want to talk about in a meeting or on this call or whatever, because you've thought about it and you've made a physical note of it.
That's interesting. So what sparked into my mind was like, okay, you guys are now talking about technical part of staying organized, which is great. But, you know, just for fun, you do work in the creative industry, you know, and you work with music, with audio signals being pushed to your ears on several occasions in different ways, in different playback systems, right? So I imagine at some point you guys work with audio, work with a music piece or a sample or whatever it is, and you do need to make a decision. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it going to translate? Will I use it? Will I not use it? What's going on there? And eventually, I assume you have a lot of creative decisions to do. And where I'm going with this is down the rabbit hole of headphones, which is, you know, what's the role of headphones in your line of work? You know, how do they help you make this kind of creative decisions and then put the pencil to paper and write them down for the next gig? Maybe Sai, you can start.
Okay, thanks. Well, they give me a starting point that I can trust. So all of those things that you said there, you know, rabbit holes, making decisions, things like that. I part of why people pay me money is to make those decisions for them. So it could be, yeah, I need to finish this record. I just can't finish this record. Well, that's where I come in. The material they have, if you wanted, like Martin said earlier on, it could never be finished. But record labels don't want records that are never finished. They want them there on their desk. So I get paid to do that. And the way that I choose between this take and that take comes down to people trusting my opinion of what's there. Is this good enough? Yes or no? Do we need to record that again? Yes or no? And I'll do this on the move, on the island of Sardo in the snow, whilst recording Kodo, or between flights, London to Lisbon. It could be anywhere. It doesn't have to now be, which it did used to be the case, in a studio, in my studio. Now I can make decisions anywhere at any point because I've got a reference point, which is this dream that you've brought to us all, Rock, that wasn't possible before. It either entailed carrying around a headphone amplifier with you and other gear, but you've done it. You've put these on our heads, and I'm able to make those decisions now. And I'm able to mix, and I'm able to master, and I'm able to compose.
Yeah, it is. You're a little bit selling our headphones right now, so maybe you should get a sales job someday. No, it's true. I've heard so many stories in the past, 6 or 7 months with the X1 headphone. There was a little bit of an upgrade to the previous models, and I'm hearing what you're saying right now, like again and again through emails and calls. So I'm starting to believe that we actually have like a really exceptional product on our hands. On this note, Martin, I do want to pick your brain as well. On how you make these creative decisions on the go. I imagine you tour a lot and you do have to make, creative or at least, mixing, audible or whatever, directoring stuff, decisions that you guys do. What's the role of headphones there for you? And, is the accuracy of the headphone like extremely important, or can you get away with something, decent enough to do the job?
No, I think it very much echoes what Si was saying. I think for me, it's all about how stuff translates. And, similar to Si, I could be anywhere. I could be in my house. I could be on a tour bus, on a flight, in an airport lounge, in a hotel room, anywhere you can really think of. I'm pretty much always at my laptop doing something to do with trying to make a decision about how something sounds. And yeah, it is so important to have something that I know I can trust and know that it will translate properly. I've got in-ear monitors that I'll use during a rehearsal, or during a show, but they're pretty uncomfortable to wear on like a day-to-day basis because they're in your ear. They're like they're molded to your ear, so like wearing them 24/7 is not ideal, which I used to do. So actually having something that I know will translate from listening to something in them and in these, and I know that it will translate properly, means that I can trust the decisions I'm making in that airport lounge and know that it will sound the same in that hotel room when I get there. And also it will sound the same or in roughly the same place when I get onto that stage and it's coming out of the front of house. It's so important. And yeah, I don't think I could get away with something that just does the job. It really needs to be something that I know I can trust, because that enables me to make those decisions and not sort of second guess myself.
So you've mentioned translation, and for some reason this word is so magical in the audio industry. It's like everybody will have a slightly different idea of what translating a mix actually means. So, for example, French guy, again working from London, William Robertson. There must be something in the water in London, I'm telling you. He's a great engineer, worked with will.i.am and that's the one I remember from the Rooster. what was I going to say? Shit, I lost my train of thought. Translation, yeah. So I was talking to him about translation, and he mentioned that for him it's about translating the original sound and emotion, kind of in a way. So closer to the, I'm not going to give justice to his answer right now, but closer to the how does something sound in a real life environment, and then how you can transfer it through all the signal chains all the way to a playback, and that would be perfect translation. That's one way of looking at it. Then, talking to other engineers, there comes the idea that it's important about the placement of instruments. So when you have a sound stage, where what is left, what is right, how do they overlap, what's up, what's front, what's back, and translate these between headphones, in-ears, monitors, cars, supermarkets, and so on. All right, so there's already two definitions of what to translate. And then there's the third one, my personal favorite, by the way, which is the overall balance, not so much of placing the instruments, sure, as well, but the overall balance, so that nothing is really picking out and then nothing gets lost in the translation. That's, I guess, the easiest one to understand. So there we go, two brilliant engineers here with me. Another two translation definitions, please. Who's going to start?
I mean, it depends on what the record is, I guess. If it's a pop record, then the way that it relates to the radio, TV, and streaming, and hopefully physical copies on record, how it moves between all those different formats and fulfills its role, which essentially is to sell music. That's what pop music exists for. It's a part of the music business that can sometimes be tenuously linked to making music. It's a business, and so translating it across all of those factors is really important. There's another side of that too, which is the music and making it for the fun of making music because you're passionate about making music. And if you're going to play something in a club and you're going to play it at home, let's use dance music as an example. You need to feel the low end in a piece of dance music, whether it's drum and bass or techno. You got to feel the sub going through your body. And then when you're in Berghain, it's a given you're going to feel that go through your body because it's a mad sound system. If you're at home wearing headphones or listening on speakers loud, it needs to also fulfill that role.
Martin, what do you think translation of a mix actually is?
Good luck, Martin.
Well, I'm actually going to do similar to what you did, and I'm going to take all of those meanings and put them all into the same one. No, I think all of those things both of you have talked about are very, very relevant and all very true. Like I think translation in a musical sense can mean so much, and it's like, and everyone does have their own interpretation of it. For me, it's about how taking something from a finished piece of work in a studio and making it translate to someone seeing it in the crowd, hearing it in a crowd, at a show, at a festival, whatever it is, and knowing that it's kind of taken that journey from this point of being mixed and mastered and released to this new point of being performed live, but knowing that it's translated well enough that it's still exciting. It's not just you're playing the song from start to finish without any changes. It's translating it in a way that is still exciting and it makes you feel something. And I think for me that's kind of where.
Fantastic. So now try for a second get into my shoes. So we make headphones that should translate your mixes. So how do we design them? Do we make them exciting a little bit? Do we want to make them in a way that they will shake your boots, like you mentioned before, or that you will feel something in your body? Do we make them just super analytical and clear and clean? That's what we do. That's what I've been doing for the past decade, exploring what is flat, essentially, and why it's... There's a flat war going on, by the way. Like we had loudness war, in the 2000s. Maybe still do, at least a little bit. And it's the similar thing when it comes to headphones and speaker design. We try to make them as flat as possible. Of course, that would be the scientific part of what we do. But it gets difficult. And just to illustrate it, because if I dive down this path, you'll be here for the next 5 hours. But to illustrate it, imagine that you need to measure if a headphone is flat or not. You can all understand how measurements are done, right? Here's the catch. To measure a headphone or even a speaker, but on the headphone side a little bit more complicated, we don't have an agreement. Are we going to use a ruler or a tape measure with centimeters or inches? We don't have an agreement on that. It's not like the hearing threshold. We have agreed as audio engineers to be 20 micropascals. And we said that's an agreement. It's not an absolute truth. We all have it differently, but we agree on it. And when it comes to measuring headphones, how they respond, the frequency response, we don't have an agreement. Are we going to use a centimeter or inches? And I'm illustrating the point over here. So what ends up happening is that all the companies, including people that buy stuff from us, we're going to talk about 10 dB. I'm again illustrating. 10 dB, 15 dB, 12 dB, whatever. But we are never gonna have the reference stated. So we don't know, are we talking in centimeters or inches now? And that's a massive difference in frequency response. And now what happens is the modern influencers and YouTubers think they know best. And of course they don't, and they mess things up even more. But because what happens is people like you might not be familiar with the measurement techniques of headphones. You live on the other side of this industry. You're using this stuff, you're not making this stuff. So you cannot know about these things. It's almost nearly impossible. So what happens is that you will go online and you will research maybe a good headphone. Something flat, I need something flat, to do my mixing jobs and so on. And you're going to end with 2 reviews. And one is going to be a winner and one not. For you, the way you're experiencing it. When in reality, one is using centimeters, the other one is using inches. And it's just apple and oranges being compared. And it's completely tricking you into thinking something that's not true. And when that starts happening on scale, all of a sudden we have a massive amount of engineers around the world being taught or being forced to think something that is scientifically wrong. And they're making decisions based on something that's scientifically wrong in the audio engineering space. So you see, there's like a little quest, a little mission inside of me, to educate as many engineers as possible that measuring headphones is not like a measuring tape. It's not the same. It's not like a measuring microphone that you put, in front of your speaker in whatever venue you are, and you're going to record something and then use A, B, or C weighted SPLs, meters. We all know this, and we have an agreement on that. When it comes to headphones, we don't have it. It's all bullshit. Isn't that fun?
If I make an example with synthesizers, you've got West Coast synthesis that came from San Francisco, and then you've got East Coast synthesis that came from Moog. And then you've got people in Europe doing their thing and people in Japan doing theirs. What they all agreed on was that they all had a point and they were all really good at doing what they did. And if you wanted to invest your time in synthesis, you kind of set your stall out and you went with one or the other. And then when you took that as far as you could investigate another type of school of synthesis. And the same happened with dynamics. You have optical compression, you have FET compressors, you have solid state compressors. They all do the same thing. And over time, you found your preference and what it is that you liked about it. And sometimes there just aren't, there's never a measurement. It comes down to trusting yourself.
Which is a fantastic finish point for this, because we're really, and we're going a little longer than we thought. I'd say that.
That's all right. It's my favorite subject, sound.
Anyway, I was going to finish, or at least try to push this conversation down this path. When you're making decisions on purchasing gear, but it's complicated. In the audio industry, you can spend an enormous amount of money. There's no limit. And essentially, I think there are two ways of doing that. So either you're the geek and you research and you make decisions for yourself and possibly for many others, or you're the one who asks someone for a recommendation on a specific thing, either on synths, on drums, on headphones, or whatever, on microphones, because it's difficult to be a pro on everything. At least that's how I see it. So I'm wondering, Martin, when you're researching, audio gear, when you're making a decision on what is the next piece that I want to upgrade, exchange, remove, add, whatever, how do you approach this selection process or the pros and cons of whatever you're thinking of?
To be honest with you, these days my decisions are based more on what inspires me than anything else. I think I could look at a spec sheet all day, but if the actual thing itself doesn't inspire me, it doesn't. Then what's it going to do for me? I'll give you an example. I recently bought the I've forgotten the name, the Chroma console from Hologram Electronics. It's this sort of synth or guitar pedal, whatever. It's like a stereo input sort of multi effects pedal. And the videos I saw of it were like, this is incredible. This is exactly right up my street, right? And like I looked at some reviews, I looked at some specs of it, but actually nothing did it for me than actually seeing it in action and actually thinking, I want to do that, or I can do that, but I can do it my way, or I can, I can work it into my workflow. So actually reviews or, spec sheets, anything like that, don't really inform me about anything these days other than, the actual facts of the product. But for me, it's more about, does this inspire me? If it does, I'll buy it more, or I'll save up for it, or whatever. If it doesn't, then it's not for me. That's kind of just how it goes for me, I think, these days.
Yeah, I think that for me, it's there's never been a better time to be a consumer of anything.
No, that's true.
Music gear, cars, trainers, you name it. Everything is there for the taking. And when I started making music, the internet wasn't there. It was magazines, records, CDs, cassettes, and television. And we had a program in the UK called Top of the Pops. And if you're into music, you would wait to see Top of the Pops every week. It was on. And I would watch it as a kid, and I would see the keyboards and synthesizers that they were using. And I'd see this name Roland written on all of them. I'm like, well, these things must be good. Everyone that I liked got one. And then on the Saturday, I'd go down into the West End and I'd go to a place called Turnkey and I'd try out these keyboards. They got to know me. It's that kid again, the one who comes in and messes around all day long. But then when the internet came along, I still had this, what are the instruments being used by people that I'm into? What are they using? I'd look at a record and try and work out what gear was in the studio in the pictures. Then the internet comes along. I'd still think like that, but now I've got this amazing resource to do research. And between those two things, seeing it in the hands of people that I like and looking online to see it, between that, I can make decisions. It sometimes goes wrong, and you put all those things together, and 2 + 2 doesn't come out at 4. You make mistakes, but that's how you learn, right? You learn from mistakes. And one of the mistakes I made early on was selling gear that I'd bought. I never sell gear now that I buy, even if I made a mistake. At least I think, yeah, that wasn't the thing I wanted it to be. I still keep it because maybe in 10 years, someone in a band's got one of those and it's broken. And then I go, oh, yeah, I've got one of those here. But Peter Gabriel, he buys 2 of everything.
Yeah, never worked at that studio because that studio is so awesome. Martin, you've ever been at it?
I haven't actually. A friend of mine who I write some music with now and again, he used to be, I think he was his assistant in there for a while. So he's been there a bunch, but I've never been, unfortunately. It looks incredible.
Yeah,
it's mad.
Yeah,
it's mad. Yeah. But it's not the only game in town. There are lots of really amazing places to capture.
So when you make a mistake and you invest and you make a studio like that and it's not the way you want it, so you don't sell it, you keep it. That would be your advice, Si. Did I get it right?
Yeah. It's I mean, you just need places to store all this.
I'm going down the rabbit hole again. Anyway, this has been long enough. Let's finish this one up. We've been talking for an hour and a half close, I believe, or something like that, an hour 15, which is like 3 sessions in one, 3 in 1, which is always a great deal. So Martin and Si, I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with me in such a casual setting. And I do want to meet you guys one day. I do have to come to London, I believe, end of year, maybe early next year. If you'll be around, I'll be happy to have a beer with you guys or whatever you guys drink. Usually it's tea, right?
Would be lovely. We're there. We're waiting for you to arrive. And likewise, I'd love to come down there.
Go ahead. We are 1 hour away from Venice, Italy. So if you haven't been to Venice, that's a great opportunity. Jump to Venice, jump to us, have fun, have a dinner on me, go back to Venice and fly back home. It's like a 2-day trip.
Actually, I'm serious. I'm going to be coming then because I didn't know you were that close to Venice.
I'll pick you up in the airport.
Right, we're coming.
The whole service.
All right.
Nice. Let's make that happen. It's been a pleasure, Rock, and Martin. It's been really nice.
Yeah, thank you so much for having both of us. And it's been great to meet you, Si. And
you too.
I'm sure we'll hook up eventually soon. And
yes, we will.
Thank you, guys.
For sure. We'll send you a picture.